All right, are we recording? Oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, cool. All right, well, I will go ahead and get started then. Thanks everybody for coming, first of all. So today we're going to be talking about quite a few of the different changes that are incorporated in V12, specifically in regards to the routing section. And in particular, if you're seeing my screen right now, this operation section. Getting some feedback. I don't know if someone. Oh, no,
it was Chris Clay. I muted him.
Okay, cool. Thank you. So specifically, we're going to be going over primarily what's in this operations section over on the left-hand side of the screen. For those of you that haven't been embedded on the web before, this is your dashboard when you log in, and you'll be presented with information on how to log in and all that if you haven't been in there before. So for today, if I open up the operations section, you'll see that we have several different pieces of information within here. The first thing that we're going to cover is this work with orders, then jump into manage out of stocks, go into route orders, and work with loads. Let's go ahead and get into it. So work with orders is the first thing that we're going to go over, and this is essentially your replacement for IQINVD and IQINVD. It's a direct equivalent to that in the web, however, it has a lot more functionality than either IQINVD or IQINVD has. So the first thing you'll notice when you come in here is that you're seeing a lot of different orders, and right here we have different statuses. If we wanted to filter down, we can come in here and type in a particular status, and if I go and click on this drop down, it shows us what we can view. So there's entered, routed, invoiced, reconciled, and registered invoices within here. Now, one point of clarification that I do want to make before we go on is I did this is IQINVD and IQINVD, and you may be thinking now, you know, registered invoices are IQI daily, so how are those showing up in here? A registered invoice would only show up for the day it was registered, and then the next morning, startup naturally purges all registered invoices out of the order file. So do not consider this a direct replacement for IQI Daily. There is a direct replacement for that, and we'll jump into it in a bit, but I just didn't want to get anybody confused by seeing registered as an option. A few other things within here, if we start scrolling over to the right, just pieces of information we can see. So what's the invoice type, what's our gross dollars, delivery days, load numbers, so on and so forth. If you haven't, or if you weren't a part of the first training session, I definitely recommend you go into the recording that we made earlier to view how to manipulate the grid and the view within here. I think it'd be really helpful, particularly in work with orders. So a couple different things that we can do within here. We do have this refresh button, so if new orders are coming in all throughout the day, as they should be, and you don't see something that just barely came in, you can hit refresh, and it will pull the most up-to-date data into this grid. If we are to double click on any of these orders, so if I just double click on that line, I'll be able to edit certain things about it. In this case, I could edit the delivery day. So essentially, if I came over here to this order and changed the delivery day from unassigned to Wednesday, for example, that will be doing the equivalent of the day change command. So if you're familiar with day change, it's DAYCHG. Changing a delivery day in work with orders is your one-to-one equivalent for that. Okay. We can also assign orders to a load within here. So we do have a more functional version of key load in another section that we'll jump into. However, if we wanted to do kind of a one-off, you know, assigning a few orders to a load, or if you just feel more comfortable doing it in work with orders, you can do that from here as well. So I could attach this one particular order to a load just by typing in the load number within here, and then I could click Save All. As we start scrolling over to the right, just a few other things we can do. If we want to change the sales rep that's attached to it, we can do that. The stop type is also another field that we can change. So is it regular, stop, pallet, cart, or staged? And I believe that would be it. So. And then outside of that, you know, there's just a bit more information that we can see in here. So where did the order originally come from? Who was it last changed by? You know, those are really good pieces of information for you to be aware of, and they all can change within here. So as I was saying before, this really is a replacement for IQINVD, just with quite a bit more functionality. So a couple of other things to point out. You'll notice that this is now in order, the entered status for the order status, excuse me. If I were to go ahead and change the delivery day on this one to, let's say, Wednesday, and put it on load 3112, click Save All. Let that go ahead and update. You'll notice that this now automatically updated to routed status. So at this point, I've put it onto a load. It is technically a routed order. So just to show you that that's real-time, dynamic in terms of updating what the status is. And it will, it's a really good way to kind of parse through the information. So for example, if you're going to be going in here and you only want to see entered orders, you could filter down to entered, save that as a view, and then you wouldn't clog up your view with anything that's already routed if you don't want to be concerned with that. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. So a couple other things that we can do within Work with Orders is, you'll notice over here we have the red circle with a line through it. This is the new way to void an order, which, this again can be locked down by role security, so not everyone may be able to do this. However, it's much, much, much easier to void an order in V13 than it is in V11. So now all I have to do is come in, find my entered order. I can click on void this order. It will then say it's going to be voided. Are you sure you want to continue? If I do, I click continue. It will process for a minute, and then it will say this has been voided. So much easier than going in, finding that order in call-ins, if that's how you were doing it originally, and then going in and voiding it there. It's a lot easier to do it through the web. Okay. A few other bits and pieces. Again, I'm going to kind of harp on this short stack over here where we do have several other functions for hiding and showing columns. Show deleted isn't necessarily as applicable for Work with Orders, but we can also do an export if need be, an audit log to see who's changed what. But most importantly, in my opinion, for Work with Orders is this help. And within this help text, we can go ahead and view different things about Work with Orders. So what's appearing in here, how do I view the detail, how do I view historical orders, so on and so forth. We have videos that relate directly to Work with Orders, what we can do. So how do I view orders, how do I print pick lists, how do I generate invoices, and the list goes on within here. Again, so different Z controls that are affecting it, what files am I actually updating would be held within the technical specs. And so on. A couple of other things we can do within here. If I wanted to go ahead and look at the details of an order, let's say this country fresh farm market, I can go ahead and click on the View Details button. And that's going to load up the order details. So I'll be able to see which products were on the order, who the sales rep was that was assigned to this order, who the buyer is, what the terms are, just in case I need information. Okay. Now, over here, you'll notice that we have the Actions button, and the way that we get this Actions button clickable is by using these checkboxes over on the left-hand side of the screen. So if I go ahead and click on one of these checkboxes, I can go into my Actions, and from here I have several different options. So the first thing I can do is view out of stocks, which I'm going to jump into again in a little bit in more detail. But essentially that will be your equivalent for see outs. So if you want to see what you have out of stock on one particular order, you can do it from here. But I'm going to show how we would do that at a larger level and manage out of stocks just momentarily. Another option that we have is printing pick list, which is your replacement for the pick list command. I do want to point out that several of the options within here, you're generally going to be running out of Work with Loads. I would say more commonly you're going to want to, print a load sheet rather than a pick list, which I'll go over. Or if you're generating invoices, you're probably going to do it for a whole load rather than just one order. But just to introduce some of these topics, you do have the option to do it for one order if you so please. So if I click on print pick list, if I come in here, I have a few different options. So what do I want to include? Do I want all products, cases only, eaches only, items that I've already printed a pick list for or not, and invoice orders only. I can make those decisions. Locations, I can say I want to print a pick list for all locations, for a particular range of locations, or I can type in specific locations. Whatever is easiest, you can run it through. For report types, we have our standard pick list, our summary pick list, and our summary recap. And then we have a few other options at the bottom. So do we want to group orders by retailer? Do we want to sort by sales rep? And do we want one retailer per page? Once that's good to go, we can click print. And the way that it'll work is it's going to go ahead and see who you're logged in as. So in this case, I'm logged in as a test user. But it'll come up, see which user's logged in. So for example, if Renee was logged in, it will show Renee's email address up here. And every email address has an iSeries user that's tied to it as well. So what it does is it looks at the email address and says, who is the user profile on green screen or panels, whatever you're using. And it then takes the spool file that it generates and sends it down to that spool file. So for example, if I'm logged in right now as HiTSTU at HeidelbergDistributing.com, if HiTSTU was linked to this email address, when I click print, and this is done processing, it's going to send spool file down into the HiTSTU DP. Okay? And that's where you would locate it. And from there, you could go ahead and send it to whatever printer you would want. Okay. A few other things we can do within here. Generate invoice. Again, as I was saying before, I would say most commonly you're going to be running generate invoice at a load level. But if you needed to run an invoice for just one particular order, you can do it within here. So you would just need to select your invoice date. We have an invoice message, which invoice message isn't used too commonly in this setting. It's something that would print on only your paper invoices, so this wouldn't get sent down to handhelds or anything like that. But you could use it, maybe around like the holidays. If you want to put happy holidays on your paper invoices, you could do that. We have print due date if you're utilizing that feature, and we also have print report of discounts given if that's something you care about. Okay. Print scan sheet, this is your web equivalent for UCS code. So if you're familiar with UCS code, again, I keep on going back to this concept of running it out of work with loads as opposed to work with orders. This is, again, something that I think you would more commonly do from work with loads, but you do have the ability to run it from work with orders instead. And your options are pretty simple. Do you want to include negative quantities? Do you want to print eaches as cases and eaches? So do you want to print your wine items as just bottles or as cases and bottles? Okay. Credit check replaces ARCOD list. I don't know if anyone within this group is running ARCOD list or not, but if you are, the credit check option, essentially what you do is you come in here and you say, what do you want to include? So all orders and all invoice statuses. And then do you want to check orders for problems for which terms? And then what do you want to see about those terms? Are they over the credit limit? Are they over credit days? Do they have a credit balance, or do they have 0 credit days? You can use a bill to retailer if that's something that's more logical for a particular scenario, but you don't need to. So you can run all of that just to make sure that that retailer actually is eligible at this point in time to purchase product. Okay. And last but not least, I'm just going to select a couple different orders over here. We have the option to go into actions and do an update. So this is the way that you would do an update multiple and assign multiple orders, in this case, to one value. Where this could be commonly used, and probably the best example is what it initially prompts you with, the delivery date. So we may be going through and seeing a bunch of orders that are currently in for Monday for a list of accounts. And we know that we need everything that's on that Monday list to be moved to Tuesday. Before, if you're in day change, you'd have to go in order by order and change the delivery date. Now I can come in and I just selected 5 orders at once, and I could set all of those orders to, Wednesday right now right off the bat. So you'll notice the 5 I selected in the background right here are showing as unassigned. If I choose Wednesday and click update, it changes all of those to Wednesday at once without me having to go in one by one and make those changes. Okay. And that really covers work with orders. Does anyone have any questions on the functionality of it? Okay. Hearing nothing, I'm going to jump directly into work with loads, but we still have a lot of the order processing component in our heads. So work with loads, again, is going to look very similar to what work with orders looks like. It's going to have that grid format that we'll see throughout all of beverage on the web. And within here, we can see different pieces of information. So for example, what is our load status? So when we come in here, we have empty, ordered, routed, invoice, and so on. So lots of different options there. Which warehouse is this coming from? What's the load number? What's our weight looking like? You will notice on some of these, you'll see the yellow background. That means that you're getting close to that maximum weight that you've defined for a particular load. So it's definitely helpful to be able to see it, visually, without having to read into all the numbers. If you have anything that's in red, you've exceeded your limit. If you have something in yellow, you're getting close to your limit. You're in kind of a warning territory. And as we scroll over, there's a bit more information. So what do we currently have? How many cases of alcohol, non-alcohol, how many kegs, what's our gross dollars? And all of this can be completely adjusted to a way that you see fit. So again, kind of touching back to that original training that I did earlier today, if you go and view that, you'll see a lot more on how you can change your grids around and make it into a view that suits you best. But within here, we also have a couple different options. One thing we can do is go ahead and click on this add button. And if we do that, we'll get prompted with a new load number that if we want to create a new load, we can do that from right within here. And that will go ahead and add that for us. A few other things, if I double click, I can assign a different driver to, oops, 1 second. Just got a little messed up. So I could assign a different driver to a particular load if I wanted to. And that would be your equivalent to load drive. So if you're familiar with that command, load drive, this is doing the same exact functionality. So this would be your one-to-one replacement in the web, is just going in, double-clicking on a load and assigning a driver to a particular load. Okay. A few other things that we can do, you will notice that we have some empty loads out here. If this is old, junky data and we just wanted to clear it out, we do have the option to come over here and delete a load. If the system kind of does a safety check for you first. So if you click on that delete this record button, and in one of the load files, it still has, items attached to it, it's going to stop you and say, wait a minute, something is still attached, or we need to go and get that inventory off of this load first. So then you could go in, make your changes, and you would be good to go. A couple other things, we do have this blue menu option button. And from within here, we can look at the orders that are on this load. We can go into map stops and edit stops and route orders, which all three of these are tied together. And I'll show you how that works in just a little bit. And then we also have load truck, which is probably more of the reconciliation training one. We'll get into that in just a couple days here. A few other things, if we click on the view details button for a load, it's going to, again, similarly to what we saw with that work with orders, it'll bring us into this kind of profile view of what the load information is. So essentially, when we look at this, we're looking at all the data we saw on the grid, just zoomed into only one load rather than all of the loads at once collected on one screen. So it's really a matter of what, how you prefer to view it. Generally speaking, I think people are looking at it from the grid and they don't need to zoom in. However, it is nice to be able to jump around. You can come in here and look at what orders you currently have on a particular load and see what status they're in. So it's always good to have that as well. So just to show you what you can do with them there. Now, where work with loads is really important and really handy, again, is going back to this actions button that I was speaking about so much in work with orders. So when I click on this, you'll notice that the vast majority of the information that I get within here is actions that I can do that are similar to what I had in work with orders, but probably more fitting for work with loads. So again, we can view our out of stocks or a particular load or a set of loads that we select at once if need be. And I'll jump into how manage out of stocks works shortly. We can print thickness, which looks identical to how it looks if we wanted to print something from work with orders. So generate invoice is a huge one for work with loads. So I definitely want this to stick out in people's heads. So if I click on generate invoice, this is essentially running our equivalent of board print from the web. So the way that it works is I would come in here, I'd select my invoice date if I want to run this for everything on that load. So maybe you already have something that's invoiced. If you don't mind doing an org rerun essentially on that one invoice, and that's fine, you can leave this as an all. We have our invoice message, which operates the same way as it does out of work with orders, where we can go ahead and type in something, but it would only go onto printed invoice or paper invoices. Then we have our option to print our due date, and then below here we have a few different options. So we have our print reported discounts given again. We can include staged orders and print work orders. But the most important one down here by far is this generate PDA files. So if I have this generate PDA files box checked off, then when I click next and go to print, what this is going to do is submit a Palm INV. So checking this generate PDA files box off when you're in work with Loads and going to generate invoices, that will run the equivalent of a Palm INV. Okay. Now, if I had selected a load that was in an invoice status, completely invoiced, and I go into generate invoices, then I'm going to be running an org rerun. And if this generate PDA files box is checked, then I'm going to be running a Palm IRER. Okay. So it's very important that we know, how this generate PDA files button works and really how generate invoices in general works. So again, once that invoicing process is done, it's going to look up to my email address and send the spool files down to that user. So I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure that you're paying attention to your prompts within this generate invoices box to make sure that all your PDAs get built properly, or to make sure that just your regular invoices get built properly. Okay. Are there any questions on that? Okay. So jumping from there, going back into the actions, we do have a few different options. So we have reprice load. That would again be more of a reconciliation component. So I'll save that for the recon class in a couple days. Print load sheet is a big one. So this one is solely for work with loads. So print load sheets is your web equivalent for preloads and new loads. And it does the work for you essentially. It looks at the load status and says, am I supposed to run preloads or am I supposed to run new loads, depending on the status of the load. So within here you have your options. You want to do cases and eaches, cases only, eaches only, and staged orders. And then you have your print dollar amounts, printed double spaced, and use case equivalents. So it's a pretty simple process, but if you folks are utilizing load sheets, it's an important one to know about. So a few other things within the actions. Print scan sheet, again, that looks identical to what we saw before. This is going to be your equivalent to UCS code. We do have print trial list, which again, we're kind of getting more into that recon register section, which we'll go over in a couple of days, but you can do that from work with loads if needed. We have our credit check, which is the ARCOD list. Auto sequence, so this will go ahead and read the coding of your retailers and automatically sequence your stocks based on what you have coded in the files. And then we have updates. So again, this is a similar concept to the mass update feature that we looked at in work with orders, where I could do a load drive for multiple loads at once if needed. I could change a truck for multiple loads, and then I have my load type and my helpers. I need to make changes there as well. Okay. Are there any questions on work with loads? Okay. There's nothing, I will move on. So manage out of stocks is your web equivalent to COUTs. So if anyone here is familiar with COUTs, this is going to be where you're going to want to perform those same functions in the web. So a couple of things that we've done that are really nice improvements. Well, one thing is that the out of stocks will always jump up to the top. So the way that we sort it is by warehouse and by out of stocks. So in this case, I'm in the Cincinnati warehouse. All of my Cincinnati warehouse out of stocks jumps up to the top. As I scroll down, you'll notice that nothing else is out of stock within here. And if I keep on going, get down to the bottom, nothing is out of stock for anything else. So again, everything jumps right up to the top, so I don't have to scroll through and look for everything. Now, one piece that I will mention is if you run COUTs for multiple warehouses, it will bring all of the out of stocks for one warehouse first, and then you'll scroll down through all of the things that aren't out of stock. And then you'll need to look for your next warehouse, which is where it will show your next warehouses. So It sorts it by picking warehouse first, and then by out of stock cases second. Okay. So a couple of things that we can do within here. First of all, it's just a great place to come for general information about what you have for your out of stock. So in this case, I'm seeing that I have, in terms of decimal cases, I have a quarter of a case of this one particular item that's out of stock right now. However, I can see that I have plenty of stock available for it. So if I need to, I can click on this checkbox and go up to actions. And from actions, I could do an auto allocate. And that will say, okay, I have plenty of quantity to cover what's unavailable right now, or what was marked as out of stock, excuse me. So I can go ahead, do my auto allocate, and it will take care of it for me. Now, if we were in a situation where we had out of stocks and we didn't have enough cases for everyone, we can go ahead and click on this View Details button. And this is going to show us exactly what we have available and what orders we have where this is currently marked out of stock. So if I come over here, we're going to go ahead and see that this is out of stock 3 cases. And I can go in here and pick and choose which order. So if there were 5 other orders within here, I could go ahead and say, these are the ones where I want to fill it, and then leave certain ones blank as well. So I could double click on this filled cases line, or excuse me, filled eaches in this case, and I could put in 1 bottle. It would update that, and you'll see that this number over here, item is on allocation. So this one is not going to let me fill this case, because you can see that although it looks like we have that much available, really all of that is allocated. Had this not been on allocation, it would allow me to put in that 1 for my filled eaches, and then this number would have gone down to 2. So I filled 1 of them, which drops my 3 down to a 2, and my available would go down 1 as well. Okay. Now, a couple of other things we can do within this actions button. We can go in here and say if we just want to mark it out of stock, we can do it here. If not, and it is out of stock, you don't have to click on that mark out. It would still capture it when it's going to the handhelds or going through Palm Edit and mark it as out of stock. We could fill, if we have the quantity and we want to fill this entire order, we can do that. Or we can do substitute. So if I click on the substitute button, it will load up my product list, and I can choose which item I want to substitute it with. Okay. It does still look at the item profile to see if you've defined one particular substitute item first, and that would still operate the same way. But if you manually wanted to come in here and define one particular item to substitute this one particular order with, you could do that as well. Okay. So are there any questions on how manage out of stocks works? Okay. And again, it's totally fine to not have questions at this point. I think once you folks start poking around in it a bit more, you'll start to gather more and more questions. So the next one that I want to jump into is route orders. And route orders is your web equivalent for keyload. So this is a one-to-one equivalent for what keyload currently is for you in green screen or panels. So a couple of things to point out right off the bat here. You'll notice over on the left-hand side, we're in our unrouted tab. So this is showing us all of the unrouted orders that we have. And on the right-hand side, we have different loads that are in the system currently. Now, if you're running AutoRoute or if you're using RoadNet or Paragon or any sort of routing solution, you don't have to worry about having to come in here and manually route all of your orders. That would still apply. There are no changes to AutoRoute, how that works. There's no changes to how RoadNet or Paragon would work either. However, for your leftovers or for things that you might need to change after the fact, this is the proper place to come. Again, this is your keyload replacement. So if I came in here and I had a few different orders that I wanted to assign to a load that hadn't previously been assigned, I can select a few, and then I can drag them onto a particular load. So if I wanted all of these to go onto this load 3112, I can check them off, click, hold down, drag it over, and drop that onto 3112. And now those orders that I had over on the left-hand side of the screen have been assigned, and you'll see my number of stops went up by 3. So if I want to view what's currently on a load, I can go ahead and click on this Expand and View Details button by just clicking on the load number itself. And when I do that, it's going to show everything that I currently have on a particular load. Okay. Now, if I wanted to move a few orders from one load onto another load, the easiest way to do that is I can click on this left arrow, and it's going to open up this load on the left-hand side of the screen. And I could then, again, select a few orders and move those over, reassign them, drag and drop them from 3112 to, in this case, 3169, just as an example. And it will now assign all of those orders to this load instead. So very easy, very intuitive, very user-friendly to just figure out how exactly to, move something from one place to another, one load to another, I should say. Okay. A few other things that we can do within here, you'll notice that we have this little short stack on each load. So if I go ahead and click on that, I have a few different options. I can do my refresh. I can do auto sequence if I want to, and I can do edit stops. So if I click on edit stops, in this case, since we're just dealing with test data, we have a small sample size, but I have 3 different stops on this particular load. So if I needed to move something, I'm not sure why these popped up. Maybe just because they're already invoiced. So if I needed to move this bottom order up one in sequencing for this one particular load, I could do that, and you'll see that it moved it. Now, I do want to point out that in this particular instance, I'm only moving it for this one particular day and this one particular load. So making a change within edit stops is not going to go ahead and change how the routing looks behind the scenes, for a regular basis. If you're coming in here and doing an edit stop, it's usually a one-off, or maybe a couple of days where you have to change the routing sequencing for a particular load or a couple particular retailers. We do also have the map stops functionality. I was looking into it a bit earlier, and I'm not going to be able to dive into it right now just because we need to go ahead and install a couple fixes before we can do that. But I would like to go over it at some point, and essentially that map stops functionality will allow you to see all of your stops on Google Maps equivalent. So it'll allow you to see this is the exact path that I'm taking right now on my route. So that's a really, really efficient, useful way of saying, am I doing this in the best way possible? So it's a cool tool. I definitely want to show you folks. We just got to get 1 or 2 things installed here, and it should be up in no time. So that essentially is how keyload on the web, or route orders, I should say, works. Does anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Hearing nothing there, I will jump into the last but not least topic of IQI Daily on the web. So IQI Daily on the web is actually known as Retailer Invoice History, and it's held under the Sales folder. So if I go into Sales and click on this Retailer Invoice History, let me load up some data here. This is where we would go in, see all of our data within our registered invoices. So the initial screen that we come into is pretty straightforward. So what are we looking at? So we have our DBA name, we have our invoice number, invoice date, so on and so forth. Exactly what you would expect to see for registered invoice information. Now, from here, if I wanted to, I could select a particular retailer, and I could come over and click on this checkbox, go into my actions, and I have an option to reprint my invoice if I need to. And then the second option that we can do is click on this View Details button. We'll be able to see a lot of information in what we call the historical order form. So this is going to show us a good amount of information, what was ordered, again, who the sales rep was, who the buyer was, who the driver was, and quite a bit more information about this one particular invoice. Now, one other thing that I do want to point out that unfortunately I can't sample for you in the test environment because we don't have an Edgar instance running for it, is you may be familiar in IQI Daily that you can put the letter S next to an invoice and hit enter, and that will bring up the scanned driver invoice. We do have that functionality in the web as well. Where it'll typically show up is right next to the invoice number, there's going to be a little button right here that you can click on, and it's going to launch you directly into that invoice. Again, going back to what I was saying before, we don't have a separate Edgar instance, which is what catches all of the invoices running in your test environment, so we can't utilize it, but you'll be able to see that come and go live. If anyone wants to see, I could always show in a different environment as well. So again, this is a direct one-to-one replacement for IQI Daily. Pretty easy to function around in. IQI Daily doesn't necessarily have a ton of different components to it, so pretty easy to find what you're looking for right off. And that essentially covers what I wanted to go over today, which I know is a lot of stuff in a short amount of time, but are there any questions at this point in time, or are we good to go for today? Anything at all so far?
Nope.
Thanks, Holly. All right, well, with that being said, I think we are good to go. So thank you, everybody, for coming out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Talk to you later.
Thank you.